Hi, Jackie. Just testing your audio.
Hi, Jackie.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Can you
Jackie.
hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Julio. Just testing your audio.
Yep. Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Julio. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's good to meet you, Julio.
Wonderful to meet you, Jackie.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you, Julio.
Good morning.
It's been a while. Oh, I can't hear you.
We'll seeing you, Jennifer. Wonderful, wonderful. It's been a while.
So good to see you
Yes. Definitely good seeing you.
and glad you're here.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate your being here.
Thank you for having me.
You make a huge
Hi, CHS is logged on. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent.
you.
Thank you.
Success.
Good morning. Good morning, Meg and Bill. We have 4 board members. I believe we need a 5th to have quorum.
Otto, has James called in?
Not yet.
Okay, let me check with him. He was having a little trouble. So let me just check in with him.
You
Okay.
could also start the meeting without a quorum. There's only one vote today,
Okay.
which is the minutes. So the minutes could be either deferred until we have 5, or frankly, the minutes could be taken up at the next meeting.
All right. Well, why don't we do that in the interest of honoring and respecting the time of those who have signed on, both as board members and perhaps more importantly, attendees in the meeting. Let's begin. So the New York City Board of Correction, October 19th, 2021 meeting is now in session. I will defer the vote until later in the meeting when we have quorum or to the following meeting. We have several announcements this morning. First, welcome to our newest board member, Julio Medina. Julio is the founder and chief executive officer of Exodus Transitional Community Incorporated, Exodus. Exodus is a faith-based, not-for-profit organization dedicated to assisting adults and youth involved or at risk of involvement in the criminal legal system. Under Julio's leadership, Exodus has served over 25,000 participants and has become one of the most successful reentry programs in the United States. I'm thrilled to welcome Julio to the board, and we're honored to have his perspective as the board grapples with critical issues in our New York City jail system. I have to say that I've had the experience of working with and learning from Julio, and I can personally attest that he is a tremendous addition to this board. So we're very, very glad, and we're grateful that you're here. Second, I want to extend an official board welcome to Stanley Richards in his new role of Director of Department of Correction, First Deputy Commissioner. Though he's been in his new role for quite a bit of time already, we as a board haven't officially welcomed, congratulated, or thanked him for his service in this new role. We, as a board, have already begun working with him in this new capacity. And we know because of his steadfast service to the Board of Correction for 6 years that he brings heart, commitment, sincerity, and a sense of great purpose to this new role. During his tenure as board member and vice chair, Stanley Richards brought empathy, intellect, compassion, and pragmatism to all of his work. I specifically want to note his leadership and work on the restrictive housing rule, bringing an end to solitary confinement in the New York City jails. Stanley, you've been a tremendous colleague, and one of my greatest honors serving on this board has been working side by side with you on some of the most critical issues the board has sought to address these past 6 years. So I thank you, and on behalf of the board, I thank you. Third, on October 5th, Executive Director Margaret Egan informed the board that she will be leaving at the end of this calendar year. Meg assumed the Executive Director post just before COVID-19, the pandemic began. Talk about baptism by fire. But fortunately for us, she's demonstrated true leadership in steering the agency staff and board through what has been a most difficult period. During her tenure, we've developed groundbreaking reforms, including the ending of solitary confinement in the New York City jails. We developed a disciplinary system that prioritizes engagement and behavior change while balancing safety. Conducted a holistic oversight response to the COVID-19 pandemic that has included unprecedented public reporting. Conducted and completed investigations into serious incidents and deaths that have led to essential recommendations to achieve reform, and reorganized the agency to more effectively meet the mission and vision of the Board of Correction. We're grateful to Margaret, to Meg, for her service to the board and her intelligence, patience, and dedication to the board's mission. All will be sorely missed. She will be sorely missed, likely in ways that we have yet to imagine. Thank you, Meg. Serving with you as Executive Director has been a tremendous honor, and I can't thank you enough. A search committee of the board is being formed, and an official search will commence in the coming days and weeks. Fourth, and finally, I want to share that my 6-year term as a board member, comes to an end this month. Appreciating the many issues we're grappling with and the transitions that are underway, both at the board, in the Department of Correction, and across the city. And I include in that, just as I mentioned, our director's impending departure. I've agreed, and I agreed earlier this month, I knew that my board tenure was coming to an end, and I agreed earlier this month when asked to stay at least until the November board meeting and possibly until the end of the year. A lot of transition going on, and at least I want to be in place to get this search going for the executive director. It's been humbling and gratifying to serve, always seeking to do good as best as I can. I've sought to center on in helping to improve, along with my fellow board members, the conditions in our jails for all who come through the doors, both persons in custody and staff. And I think we all can attest that it hasn't been easy for any one of us. But I'm going to depart knowing that I tried to make a positive difference. As board chair, it's been my aim to help bring an end to solitary confinement. I'm proud that we've taken a giant step forward, but I acknowledge that there's still so much more work to be done. And I'm going to try to do my part as not as a board member, but as a civilian in this city, doing my part. It's been my honor to work with board members and board staff, with DOC and CHS, with community advocates, and to learn from persons in custody and their families about what more we need to do to make the jails safe and more humane. And I just want to thank all of you for your partnership and for your many efforts. I now want to take a few minutes to address the current conditions in the jails. The board remains deeply concerned about the conditions for people in custody, for the DOC staff, the CHS staff, and all others who are working in the jails. Since our September meeting, 4 people have died in custody. A 41-year-old man died at NYC on September 19, 2021, and a 34-year-old man died at Lincoln Hospital, September 22, 2021. A 64-year-old man died at Elmhurst Hospital on October 15th. A 58-year-old man died at New York Presbyterian Hospital on October 18th. The Board of Corrections sends our heartfelt condolences to their families and their friends. Yesterday, the board released a report on the attempted suicide of Nicholas Feliciano in 2019. The board's investigation into Mr. Feliciano's treatment found that correctional and medical staff missed or ignored several red flags, and correctional staff failed to intervene in a timely fashion. Tragically, many of these red flags have long been present, and they're proving increasingly problematic as conditions in the jails worsen. Significant numbers of staff remain on sick leave or restricted from working with persons in custody, creating unsafe conditions for both staff and detained persons. There's an unfair burden on those who do work that is not easing up, and the unacceptable delays in providing essential services, including medical and mental health services to persons in custody, has worsened. While we are encouraged that the population of detained persons has fallen in recent weeks, that decline appears to have leveled off, and the jail population remains near pre-COVID levels. The board we continue to call on all criminal justice stakeholders, the judges, district attorneys, defender organizations, the New York State Department of Correction and Community Supervision, the department, and the City of New York to take immediate steps to reduce the jail population. While no one mechanism is a silver bullet, collectively, measures to reduce the jail population will ease the tremendous pressure on the city's jails and the staff. As long as the population remains high and the staffing crisis continues, persons in custody and those who protect and work with them are in an impossible position, and these troubling conditions will persist. The city and the state have been working closely to decarcerate. While this collaboration is encouraging, the board does have a number of questions and concerns, especially about the recently announced plan to move women and members of the transgender community to Bedford Hills and to Connick. The board wants to ensure that everyone who is moved will be able to appear in court for all scheduled appearances and have access to counsel. The board is also concerned that all will have access to quality programming and the ability to visit with their loved ones. And so we're making inquiry of the department as to what plans they have in place and how we can assure that they abide by them. The board calls on the City of New York to continue to move with urgency to create a safer environment for persons in custody and for staff. I will pause here and ask if there are any questions or comments on what I've presented from board members. Okay, seeing no hands raised and hearing none, I now will ask Commissioner Schiraldi to provide his update to the board.
Actually, Jennifer, we now have a quorum, so if we want to go back and do the minutes, we can take care of that.
Okay, we'll take care of that right away. And then we'll hear from Commissioner Schiraldi. So I will ask a board member for a vote to, let's see, a motion to approve the September 14th, 2021 meeting minutes. May I have a motion? Okay, Jacqueline Sherman has made a motion. May I have a board member second the motion?
Second.
James Perino, second.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any edits or debate, comments concerning the minutes? Seeing no hands and hearing none, I will ask for a vote to approve the September 14th, 2021 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I believe I've heard from all board members. I am in favor. None opposed. The board meeting minutes for September 14th, 2021 have been approved. I will now turn to Commissioner Schiraldi for his update.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Chair Jones, Austin, it's a bittersweet moment. Sweet, I'm sure, because you're going to go on and do wonderful things, deploy considerable talents next. Bitter because you've led this Board of Correction incredibly well, and it's I'm going to miss being able to partner with you. I feel like we just stuck our offer you my best wishes for wherever your talents take you next. It's been I've known you before this, but got to know you better during your time here, and I continue to be impressed by the work you do, and I know we will miss you, and the board will miss you, I'm sure. I also do
Yes, thank you.
Also wanted to just acknowledge the passing of, as you mentioned, several people incarcerated here, several staff members. But just a very, very brief, I'm not going to talk for long, but give up a little bit of my time just for a brief moment of silence. On this somber note, appropriately somber note, I would signal that we have a lot of work to do as a department. I also want to say that there has been considerable work done and progress made since the last board meeting, which was on, that's good. That was on September 14th. The day before, we began a series of meetings with the mayor. For the first about half of this month since the last meeting, we met every single day with the mayor, including weekends, and put together a whole raft of reforms to help us improve safety, reduce triples, reduce unmanned posts, so that we can get about the business of reforming the department. Those have generally been quite successful, but as you mentioned, the hole is so deep that we're not popping the champagne corks, we're not spiking the ball in the end zone. So we did begin incentivizing staff to come to work. And for people who work triples, we incentivized people who went from one post to another. We began providing just sort of food for people who were working doubles and triples, car rides home, all sorts of things to improve morale. Push to reduce the population, as you mentioned. It's down by about 500 people since back then, about 66,000 people in custody then, it's about 5,500 people in custody now. And the efforts we've made to incentivize staff to come to work and to work overtime and to get people to move posts, to discipline people for AWOLing, now giving 30-day suspension for AWOLing, to make sure people really are sick when they call in sick, have all begun to reap benefits. So the number of people out sick, the number of people out on personal emergencies, the number of people who have AWOL are all down considerably since the last meeting, and that in turn has reduced the number of triples and the number of unstaffed posts. Unstaffed, I mean, both of them are really terrible things to have. I mean, if somebody would have told me that 4.5 months into my job, I'd be bragging to the Board of Corrections that we have fewer unstaffed posts and fewer triples, as though that's some sort of achievement, I would have told them they were crazy. But that's where we are, and that's our job right now to do. Our hope is that this continues and that we will soon have no unstaffed posts and no triples, so that we can get about the business of actually engaging in the types of reforms that I had hoped I'd spent my first 4 months doing, like providing robust programming and robust incentives to people so that we're not that we're running a better place, a more decent and humane jail. That being said, we continue to push forward on our efforts. So those are not inconsiderable wins, and you can sort of see it tangibly walking around. I hear staff talking about how there are more people here to work. I see people I hadn't seen before. I don't recognize the people who check me in when I drive onto the island, which means that there are people working there that weren't working there for the first 4 months. But I also, I see it in the numbers too, and it's somewhat crazy that we've almost gotten used to doubles and triples as much as we have. And I think that as we recede from that, we're going to reap some pretty serious benefits in the quality of work our staff are doing in our ability to produce people to court on time, and to the medical appearances on time, and to their meetings with their defense attorneys on time, and to recreation and religious services, all those things that sort of will improve their quality of life and reduce the very high rates of tension in the facilities. We'll be able to do all of those things better, and I really sort of long for that day when we can do the kind of planning and thinking that I know we all want to do. That said, we have advanced the ball about what we talked to you about last month, young adult programming. We put that out for preferred posts. I think that's called preferred post. There might be some other name. Is that right, Chief? Are they preferred posts, or what kind of posts are they?
Yes,
That's it, preferred posts. And we got more than enough people to volunteer to work with young adults, which is no mean feat because, as you guys know, the violence rate's much higher in the young adult unit. We're preparing them right now. They're literally in training now. We designed it with those line staff, many of those line staff, and with the young people. We've got the Young Adult Task Force, which several BOC members are on, but also community members, advocates, unions, helping us think it through as we do it. And we're intending to launch on November 1st. Units have been physically rehabilitated. We ordered cool new furniture that will be way different than the furniture that was there before, and the young people got to vote on what furniture they want with a little dotocracy. We're hoping that this is the kind of buy-in and good design and program-rich environments that will one day characterize this entire jail. But every journey starts with the first step, and we're taking that first step on November 1st. Look forward to walking through that unit and having each and every one of you sit down with those young people and those staff and hear how it's going before our next one of these meetings. So I think I'm going to sort of stop there. I know that there's going to be a million questions. I didn't write a whole long speech because I wanted to just sort of get into the meat of the meeting. But I'm certainly going to be here if you guys have any questions for me, and my team's here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And again, thank you for your very generous words concerning me. Are there any, do any board members have any questions or comments for Commissioner Schiraldi at this time?
Yes,
Dr.
I have a comment.
Okay, please begin.
Hello?
James, we can hear you. Please begin.
Okay, yes. I had the fortunate to tour RNDC, and one thing I observed is something I've been talking about for years now on the board, that these cells must be secured, the doors have to be fixed, and it kept on pushing off. We're going to do it. Yes, we're going to do it. And I mean, officers being safe when they make their tours at night, securing those doors is like a huge factor in staff security. And for the first time, I was really actually excited to see like brand new doors installed with a whole new locking device that, not only, it wasn't even fixing the problem, it just recreated the way the doors work. They put brand new doors, brand new systems. And, before Commissioner Schiraldi took his place, I mean, we've been promised for a long time to fix these doors. And when I walked in that area, I couldn't believe it was actually done. The system is very advanced. RNDC is a very old jail, but the system that was put in is advanced. It really creates safety for the officers, and it's definitely a huge step in the right direction. And as Commissioner Schiraldi said, there's a lot more to go, but going in the right direction, it's, doing one thing at a time and getting it done. I was really pleased to see that. So I just want to let everybody know, like, yes, you could talk it, but you got to walk it too. And I see positive things happening. I was also a part of that system with the young adults, and I sat in with First Deputy Commissioner Richards. I think he's doing a great job. It was a diverse group of people, and it didn't matter, what side of the table you were at. We're all there trying to make it better for the young adults. So I was really encouraged to see that also. So in the middle of a lot of negativity with press and stuff, I just want to say, like, I do see it going in the proper direction. Not to say we don't have a long way to go, because until people feel safe, nothing else really matters. But the direction that the department's taking is definitely going in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Perino. I want to say thank you for that. And yes, like when I got here, the plan was 2 years to fix all the doors. Now the plan is to fix them all by the end of this year. And an additional 50 just got fixed. Another 50 will have been fixed very shortly. So we're well on our way. We're over halfway there. I want to applaud John Claude Lebec for that. I'm also mindful of that poem, right? Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a jail. So, I mean, you can still run a lousy jail with good doors, and you can run a better jail with lousy doors. And what we're hoping to have is a good jail with good doors. And so that's an important step, but we're mindful of the fact that we just have to focus like a laser beam on fixing stuff. And one other fix I forgot to mention, which is super since September 13th. So yes, the doors, that was great. But the other thing is EMTC, the closing of intake at OBCC and the opening of it at EMTC has really been incredibly beneficial. OBCC intake was every bit as bad as the legislature made it out to be when they came and had a press conference. That was a facility that was slated to close. And then when the population rose, we reopened it, but we didn't have enough staff. And so it was absolutely chaotic. And we really knuckled down on that to open up EMTC. We opened up a whole jail in the midst of this pandemic and this crisis. Those staff and staffing crisis, right? Triples and unstaffed posts. Those staff in that place stepped up, and the leadership stepped up. We had 21 24-hour violations in OBCC in August. We've had no 24-hour violations in EMTC since it opened on September 20th. So we want to keep that record up. I want to applaud Chief Stukes and particularly Dep Harvey, who really has been terrific and put in a lot of overnight hours, making sure that we didn't have 24-hour violations. And again, if folks want to come through, dramatic difference between what was happening before in OBCC and what is happening in intake now. And I also want to thank our partners at CHS for that, because we couldn't have done that alone.
Thank you. Dr. Cohn?
Thank you. Congratulations to the department on those accomplishments. I remember I walked RNDC with Commissioner Perino, and we were able to open supposedly locked doors at that time. But
yeah. Hey, Commissioner Cohn, can you speak up just a little? It's a little hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I, it's my understanding, based upon the visits that the board has made and the reporting that's been done, that at this point, many of the board standards are being violated, and I have no interest in sanctioning the department right now, because it's totally understandable, given the staff who aren't coming to work, that you can't meet the board standards. But I would like to know if you could provide for the board on a regular basis information about some of the standards which are critical. The ones that I would say are if you're unable to provide council visits, let us know each week. That would be, if you can, let us know that too. If you're unable to meet court production each week, let us know. If you are unable to provide recreation and religious services each week, let us know. And if you're unable to provide visits, let us know. And additionally, this would have to be worked out with CHS, and it's an agenda item today, but access to medical services, particularly sick call. And I would add that there should be a separate report for the women because they're going to be at a different facility. I think a lot of those things that I just asked for, you're collecting anyway. I'm not. I do not want to put more burdens on the department, but I think that that we should know, and you know, what's happening and what's not happening in terms of these very, very fundamental aspects of the jail. And I would appreciate if you could respond to that. You don't have to respond right now, but if you could produce as much of that as possible, I'd really appreciate it. I think the
Yeah,
board would
we'll
be very
work
helpful.
with, sorry. We'll work with Executive Director Egan and figure out exactly of all that list, what we already have. And then beyond that, we'll work with her on figuring out whether it's going to be burdensome or it's easy to get you the rest.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Are there any other board members who would like to comment or ask questions of the commissioner at this time? Okay, again, seeing no.
Yeah, no, I do have a question or two, if I might.
Please.
Good morning, Commissioner, and I too am heartened to hear of the progress you've made over the past weeks. I would like to hear a bit more about the planning around moving the population from Rose M. Singer. In particular, to the extent that you're able to share what the timeline looks like and what the expectations are around the length of time the city will be using resources upstate. I'd also very much like to hear what both for the population of women and moms and transgender people in custody, what plans are in place to evaluate the entire population for release, preferably before transition. And for those folks who will be moving, I would like to hear more about how you are working to assure that medical and mental health services will continue, and also to promote visitation and to ensure that families will be able to see their loved ones, and particularly visitation with children.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Sherman. I'll handle parts of that, and then on the population reduction, I want to kick it over to Makche, and on health and mental health, I want to kick it over to CHS. But I'll try to, if I can remember the other stuff. Timing is the first 10 women will go Thursday, and then Mondays and Thursdays, about 20 women each day until there are no more women here. And there's about 230 women here, 240. So that'll take about 7 weeks, give or take, because everything, never goes perfect. The benefit, we toured Bedford Hills. It's a very good facility. We were very impressed by it. There was robust programming. There was a lot of nice physical space, not an outdoor space for people to be able to get out in. Visitation is actually it's better than we have. They have 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, and there isn't a time limit when you go there. We're an hour, and we have much more limitations on hours. So we were favorably impressed. We talked to a lot of the women there, and they said it was better time than the time they spent at Rikers. It's hard to say that. I think RMSC is one of our better run jails, but it's still to them felt better. And I think partly because of the programming they were able to have access to. In terms of visitation, we intend to rent nice buses that will take people from Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Manhattan several times a day, so that people can go back and forth. They can stay for a long time, or they can come back on the afternoon bus, that kind of thing. We're working out the ability to communicate with Defense Council right now. And there's a lot of issues around that, but that's being worked out with both the state, us, and several defender organizations. I'm trying to think what other the parts of this, and you know, the benefit is 400 staff, right? That will be able to free up, who now run RMSC, who will be able to use to eliminate triples, eliminate unstaffed posts, and help us bolster staffing so that we can begin doing more and more programming. This has been part of a broad effort to send sentenced individuals, new sentenced individuals upstate, to release people on technical parole violations, all of which have helped reduce the population by 500. And we're going to continue to push to get it down further, not just by transferring people to other prisons, but as Mokche can tell you in a second, by reducing the population. So I think that covers my part of this, and I'll kick it over to Mokche and CHS if there's still more stuff left that I didn't touch on.
I mean, we can, Jennifer, we had planned on an entire agenda item on the state of the jails to talk about decarceration. Marcos is here to present on decarceration overall, suicide prevention,
Yes,
intake and new admission, et cetera. So
we
can
can
move
move
to
into
that.
that at this time, yes.
So,
Okay.
so can I just ask a question,
Mhm.
Meg? Or
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
right. So I'm sorry, I had trouble getting in at the beginning, but are we going to go into discussing officers not coming in, issues of vaccination? We just made a implicit. There's a whole discussion that I think needs to happen with mental health, how long it takes the inmates to get the care they need. A week is not acceptable. You know, are we considering to try to move the mayor and others to make it an obligation that you have to have a vaccine? I mean, we've done it in the schools.
So if I may just
So,
interject.
okay, I'm sorry, Jen. Yeah.
I just want to interject and say that these are items that are on the agenda.
Okay. Yeah.
And we will definitely be coming to them, getting to them.
Okay. Then I apologize, and I'll.
No apology needed. You're just stressing the importance of these issues. And
Thank
so
you.
we agree as well. Yes, Marcos Soler, the executive director of MOCJ, is going to present on the decarceration work. I do want to note that the advocates have raised concerns as well about this move, and they, like board members, are concerned about visitation, about court appearances. And so I just wanted to be noted that advocates have expressed concerns as well. Meg, we can turn to Marcos at this point, but if you'd like first, I'm going to suggest that you give an overview of just, where the board is on many of the issues concerning the state of the jails at this time. And then we'll turn to Marcos Soler, if that's, and I'm just Commissioner. I expect that that's okay with you.
Yes.
Good deal. And thank you. And I too am heartened by the progress that has been made, all the while appreciating all of us that so much more needs to be done. That likely will be the case for a while. Doesn't negate, doesn't take away from what you have done. And we thank you for that. Meg?
Great, thank you. Before we turn to the state of the jails, I just want to acknowledge, Jennifer, your announcement and want to thank you directly for your guidance and support over the last 2 years. I am eternally grateful for your partnership and mentorship as we've worked together. I also want to thank the rest of the board for your support and partnership over the last 2 years. And I want to thank the board staff. This is an amazing, dedicated group of people who care deeply about our mission and the impact that we can and need to have. And you all do your work in incredibly challenging conditions with far too few resources. And I have been honored to work with you and extremely proud of what we have accomplished together. I also want to thank DOC, CHS, the advocates, people in custody, and their families who do this essential and challenging work of making these jails safer and more humane. And it's in this moment of crisis in the jails that I hope that all stakeholders, the board and others, will come together to strengthen the oversight of the city jails, including the critical role that the Board of Correction plays. This board must have meaningful authority to address systemic issues in the jail system and an ability to strategically and effectively exercise that authority. It also must be fully resourced to meet the challenges faced by the jail system and those who live and work in it. As Jennifer said earlier, the board remains deeply concerned about the state of the jails. During recent tours, board staff found some improvement in conditions, but we remain concerned that the staffing crisis is leading to troubling conditions in intake, including the provision of medical and mental health care, unsanitary conditions, and interrupted access to mandated and other services. As part of our ongoing monitoring, board staff continue to monitor the department's response to grievances. And to that end, we have a survey on the board's website to receive feedback on the grievance system from persons who have been in custody or their families. We're encouraging anyone who is interested in participating in the survey to go to the board's website to complete the survey. For the department's update on the general state of the jails, as I mentioned, we would like to focus on the following 5 areas: decarceration, intake and new admission, suicide prevention, and the impact on mandated services. I will now turn it over to, and further discussion on the transfer of women to Bedford and to Connick. But first I'll ask Marco Soler, the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, to present on the city's decarceration work. Marcos, it's all you.
Thank you, Director Reagan. Legislative Director Reagan. Thank you, Chair James Austin, and members of the board for inviting me. Give me 1 second. Sorry, apologize. Taking my mask off. Sorry. So I have submitted to the board a quick presentation of what we are. I think we all are aware of what was the population before the pandemic, where we were around 5,400, 5,500, building on the tremendous success of this administration in reducing population. I remind you at the beginning of the administration, we were about 11,000 people in jail on a daily basis. And we cut the population in half. Then the pandemic came. And then the summer of 2020, we started to experience the increasing gun violence. And since then, the population has increased substantially. So what we are trying to do is to identify what is driving the population up and what are the factors. And then once we do that and understand what's driving the population up, then we can certainly address and put very specific proposals to reduce the population. Let me start by saying that today, as Commissioner Sheraldi indicated, we are back to the numbers than we were just in March of 2020. We are around 5,500 people, but there is much more than we can do. So where we are is 3 factors are driving the population up. Delays in the case processing of cases is the most important one. Has resulted in a jail that is actually functioning, as you know, as a prison with more people being held for longer periods of time. We have more people in jail for violence offenses. Just before the pandemic, the number was 2,800 people in for violent felony offenses. That number today is about 4,000. That's the only population that is up by 1,200 people. and then setting bail in more cases and higher levels while slowing down the use of alternatives to detention. So I will focus primarily on the first in the first factor because I think is the most important one, and then we'll explain the additional strategies that we are developing as a city. The most important strategy, next slide please, is certainly to understand exactly the impact of case processing. And as I mentioned before, if you look at these categories, from March 16 of 2020 to the breaking point of August 30th, you can see that several categories were up: violent felonies, non-violent felonies. Were the two categories that were up, other, but there were some categories that we were down. So our priority was to understand why violent felonies detainees were down. And all the work that we have been doing has been to understand that particular category and develop strategies that we could do to bring that population down. Next slide, please. You will see then the number of people who are in for more than 16 months, 12 months, is 1,632. Only 3 of them are for misdemeanors. All the others are for felonies. The vast majority for violent felonies. That number is up from 900 in January 2020. That's a very substantial increase. Today, that number is 1,646. Our goal is not to turn the jail into a prison, but rather to return the jail to its original function. And that is what we are trying to accomplish. But what we need to do is to move all these cases. We have a substantial number of people, a very large number of people who have been in jail for the entire pandemic. And what we need is for, I think the chair indicated before, for the defenders, for the courts, for the DAs to work with the city and to all the partners to make sure that these cases are moving. We know some of the things that are affecting the delay. If you can go to the next slide, please, I'll walk you through some of the factors. We know that the docket is increasing. This year, we have seen the docket of the courts to increase in the handling of felony cases. We have fewer felony cases than had been closed and has been indicted. The first time since 2018. 2018 was down. 2019 and year to date was down. The same thing for the same period of time in 2020. This is the first time we're up. Next, if you go to the next slide, you will see that these are some of the factors. Court appearances are down by 30%. Pretrial hearings are down by 40%. If you go to the next slide, you will see the production of inmates, people in custody, has decreased significantly from about 500 people every day, almost 8% of the population in 2019, and around that number prior to the pandemic, to a number that is less than 100, about 100 people now, and just about 1 or 2% of the population in custody. So what we need to do is for those offenders to be produced in court, and certainly 100 people is not going to cut it. We need to increase that number significantly, and this is where the partnership is so important between DOC, but certainly all the court actors, the courts, the judges, certainly the defenders and the DAs. The next slide shows you also one of the problems that we have identified and we are trying to address. The number of postponements, adjournments has increased significantly from about a median of 9 to 13. The average days between adjournments has also increased. As a result of that, the median case length in August went up from 297 in 2019 to 542 in 2021. All of these delays, next slide please, brings us to the same problem, to the main problem, which is felony pleas are down significantly by more than 50%. Trials are down by more than 90%. In the state, we are not seeing the same kind of impacts. In other parts of the state, we see reductions that are, or the slowdowns that are much smaller. If you go to the next slide, you will see that these also translate very specifically for the people who are here. And to my point, that we are running these days more of a prison than a jail. the number of people sentenced for felony cases has decreased significantly by almost 60%. We have about 10,000 in 2000 by this time of the year in 2018, and about similar number in 2019. Only 4,000 in 2021 when we run these numbers at the end of August. People, certainly there are two ways in which we can reduce the jail population is people can be sentenced or people can return to the community. But certainly we know that right now sentencing is definitely lagging significantly. And it's because all these things that I mentioned before, cases are not being processed. That brings us to the next slide, please. We also have seen some pressure I mentioned before in terms of admissions. That number has decreased. And what we have called very actively is particularly for the non-violent felony offenses and the misdemeanors to reduce the number of admissions. We know violent felony offenses are significantly up from 2020. We know the cause. You see many more murder, attempted murder, assault one, and gun possession cases in jail today than you did just 18 months ago. But what we see was a lot of admissions for nonviolent felonies and misdemeanors. I'll talk a little bit in 2 seconds about what we are doing to address that. And the final number, I think, or the final slide, sorry, is an important one in which we see that until very recently, alternatives to detention that have been proven very effective prior to the pandemic, such as supervised release, were not in full utilization. And bail was certainly said in many more times than any time before, prior to the pandemic. So you can see that supervised release was about 19-20% of cases, arraignments prior to the pandemic, right before March 16. That number obviously stopped during the pandemic, and then we never fully recovered until recently, where we have returned to 20%. That explains why we have had so many admissions in categories as misdemeanor admissions as well as nonviolent felony admissions. So what are we doing specifically is, number one, talking to all our partners in the system to have the case processing delays addressed. We need that first and foremost. What else? You already know we have moved city sentences upstate. We have worked very closely with parole on two areas. One, the technical parole violators, but most effectively also we are working with them very closely on addressing new arrests of people who are under parole supervision. And those cases are moving fast. And if you look at the population numbers, you will see decreases in that population, people with a new arrest and a parole hold. As I said, we have tried to activate our supervised release program. We think it's having an insignificant impact. We are working to try to do the same thing with supervised and electronic monitoring in some instances as a solution for some individuals. We always have been and emphasize a lot from my office the importance of city sentence diversion. ITI programs, I think, are extremely helpful. We are trying to reemphasize and reactivate that. There are 6 people right now in the 6A program. Certainly, we are reviewing every week additional possibilities of adding people to that program. We are trying to expedite 730 processing to make sure that determinations about people's mental health state is determined immediately, and then a transfer to a state has also to be expedited. We know too many people who have been already sentenced to the state for more than 3 or 4 or 5 weeks and now are still waiting in the jails. I work closely with Commissioner Shirali and his team to make sure that those transfers occur. Those are our current strategies. I cannot emphasize enough that our main strategy is obviously delays in the system. We need to return to a full-time functioning of our system, a full-time processing. Everybody knows, we know that the courts know, the defenders know, the DAs knows that we had a full-time effective system right now, we will not have 1,200 more violent felonies in the system as we do right now in jails than before. We will not have 1,600 people in jail with more than for being there for more than 12 months. And our goal is to reduce those numbers significantly. and we can do it certainly with the cooperation of them, or we will also pursue the cooperation with the state. I cannot think of the state enough. Has been a tremendous partner in the last month and a half to try to help us in this process. So that's my report on what we are doing to continue to reduce the jail population.
Thank you. Thank you, Executive Director. I want to ask board members if they have any questions before, though if you do have questions before you get to them, we get to them. I just want to point of clarification, Executive Sola. You likened our jails presently to the prison system. You're only in as much as people are staying, people who have been indicted for felonies are not having their court cases processed in a timely fashion, lesser alternatives to detention. I just want to clarify that we are not seeing a situation where people have been tried and convicted and are still being held. I just want to make sure you're likening it only to the sense of how long they are staying, but not the case that they've been tried and convicted and are still being held.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, only to the fact that when you have people there in such an indefinite situation, I'm liking it to that effect. Not necessarily, as you know, no people have no convicted. Certainly that's the case. But when I go and I see that there are 260 people with a murder charge who has been there for more than 30 months, I have very concerns about that because I want those people to be processed. I want those people to have the day in court. That is what I'm trying to say. Those individuals need to be either in state custody or out in the community, whatever is the decision of the justice system. But what we cannot do is to have them there for 30 months, just waiting.
Understood.
Thank you for a clarification, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments board members have for Executive Director Solar? I see that Dr. Cohen has raised his hand, please. Bobby, you're on, okay, you're on mute.
Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Stoller. I really appreciate your being here and your presentation. And just on the last point, when in the late 1980s, the average length of stay was probably 30, and now it's 10 times that. So they're really and jails are not designed. They don't have jobs. They don't have sufficient recreation. They don't have programs. So I completely agree with your problem, with your question, and obviously we have to get past that. I have a few questions. Last year, with someone, the department, CHS, and MOCJ carried out a tremendous program and you showed the graph, to reduce the population from 5,500 to 3,700 in a month. That hasn't happened this year. There is a rising pandemic in the jails. Victor Mercado was a 60-year-old man in a wheelchair who died, who contracted COVID in the jail and died. Why was he? A year ago, he would have not been there. I mean, he had a $100,000 bail, but he should have been evaluated for being released. And I wonder, and I'm going to ask a few questions, and you can answer them in order. If you are doing what MOCJ did last year, coordinating a process with the defense bar, the district attorneys, CHS and DOC to discharge as many people as possible. Just, I guess the other question is, and really you can answer it, but I just point that people who are in the jails right now and not getting their cases moved and not getting to court. You showed the number of people not getting to court. It's dramatic. In New York State, as I understand, I'm not a lawyer, but I understand that the only reason for bail, is to assure that people come to court. Put people in jail for enormous amounts of bail and not even let them get to court is a tragedy. And you're not the judiciary. You didn't talk about the judiciary, except for some. I mean, I think you may have made something about bail is being, the judges are being harsher on bail right now. But I wonder what the city can do about the behavior of the judiciary at this point. Thanks for listening to my extended questions.
I will address the first one. Sorry, the second one first, and then I will address your first question. So besides bail, also what we see is the number of people who have been remanded, and our remanded there has increased, which is also a factor. But you are absolutely right. There is a large number of people who are there for bail. This is until recently, that's my last slide. This is why we saw a lot of folks with non-violent felonies and misdemeanors there who were there because of bail. And what we have seen is that the utilization of supervised release is actually helping. This is something that we have called all along. And I know DA Vance and others have also called for the utilization of supervised releases, which is one of the tools that we can do. There are many other ways in which we can do this, which is also, judges can make different decisions, but I am not here and I will never get into the role of telling judges how to make decisions on individual cases ever, right? My role is to set up strategies, to set up interventions and programs that give judges discretion, latitude to choose those programs. And as I said, I think they are using it now in the last month more, and that's why we see the reductions. But at the end of the day, the courts are independent, a structure of the government, and I'm not going to tell them how to behave or what to do. What I can tell you is, without telling what to do, is what I know is I need the cooperation of all the court actors, of all the members of the justice system to move these cases. This is not just a problem in New York. We know in other jurisdictions, but what we know is in the state, they are doing a better job than we are doing in the city. And we just want, if we have some of the case processing that was similar to the state, we will have a significant reduction of the people in population, because we have seen more police over there. We have seen more trials. We have seen more court appearances in general. All these indicators that I presented to you are much better in the state. So we know the parts of the state are doing better, and we just want here the actors in the city to come together and cooperate fully. So all what I'm asking is for them to come to the table, as you are saying, to try to move these cases. With regards to the first question, the discharge of COVID releases, I think I'm not trying to punt your question, but I just want to highlight this. It's a radically different population than we are facing, perhaps not just in terms of the medical information, which I don't have access to and I don't know, but I can tell you from the perspective of who is there. And then one of the elements that I mentioned is we used to have 2,800 people accused of in pretrial for violent felonies. Right now, the number is 4,020 something. So that's 1,200 more. It's just very, very different, because not every actor is going to agree to the release of folks in the same way than they were going to do it before. It's just a fact. So I am focusing primarily on the kind of things that I think I can accomplish. It's not that I'm completely opposed to this strategy. I don't think the mayor is completely opposed to this strategy or anything. We are looking at every single element that we can do to reduce the population, but we have to do it in a manner which is safe. And there are many concerns, obviously, about the folks who have been there, primarily because of the increase in gun violence in the city. And as I said, primarily we see significant increases in the number of people who are there for murder, attempted murder, assault one, and gun charges. And they were not there before. They were not there in March 2020. So I have to work with the reality. The city has to work with the reality that we have people right now in custody.
Can I just add a couple of points?
Hi,
Chair?
sorry, it's, sorry,
If I may, there are several people speaking at one time. Is there another board member who'd like to speak at this point? Okay, and is it Commissioner Giraldi? Are you coming in?
Put it back on. I was just going to add a couple of points if you want, but I can wait till other questions occur if you'd prefer.
I don't.
I think a question or comment for both MOCJ and DOC. In terms of releases and expediting cases, how are we doing with young adults in terms of connecting them to ATIs? If you have any data specific to young adults up to age 24.
I will get you specific. I don't have data with me in front of me right now on how many folks are going into alternatives to incarceration. I will certainly get you those numbers in terms of expediting some releases. I think you're referring to both what I mentioned before about expediting of the 730 program. I know, for instance, that every person who was needed an examination and was misdemeanor the examinations have been done. They are right now examining everybody who has a felony. Certainly CHS can talk more about these. I think we are doing everything possible to make the quick decisions they are as a city. I also mentioned this point, and I think Commissioner knows, we certainly, those who have been sentenced, those who already have been sentenced is in the other category that I mentioned before. I think there are about 120, 130 any given day in jail, need to be transferred quickly to the state because they have already been sentenced and convicted and they need to be moved. So those, we are working specifically in every category to try to reduce the population significantly, to bring it back not just to the 5,500, which we have already reached, than was before the pandemic, but to a number that makes the work of Commissioner Shirelli, Department of Correction, much more manageable right now, given the staffing shortages.
There's only one sentenced young adult man and no sentenced young adult women right now. Just so you know, it's really, the young adults are purely a pre-sentenced population. And that's largely true of everybody else. Like if you look back before the pandemic, there were around 600, 700, 800 people in for technical violations at any given point in time. Today is like 140. Back then there were around 500, 600 city sentenced people in the jail. Now it's, hovering around 100, 120. And we have about the same number of total people. So it's really a pre-sentence population, like Executive Director Solar pointed out. And when you look at incidents, violent incidents, the longer people are here, the higher their rate of violent incidents is. So, we've sort of focused on the people that are here for the most violent incidents and tried to get the courts to move them. And they tend to have been here more than 400 days. That group, that's sort of 2% of the population. That accounts for 30, 40% of the violence. They've tended to be here for a long time. Part of why that's problematic for a whole bunch of reasons. Part of why it's problematic is often they're facing very serious charges. So if they engage in an act of violence, it's tragically a freebie. They're really not held accountable in any meaningful way by the court systems because their pending charge is so serious that they rarely get prosecuted for the new thing they did. And even if they do get prosecuted, it's so attenuated from when they actually did the thing. So that frustrates staff quite a bit, that people can splash them and nothing happens, or throw feces at them and nothing happens. And I can totally understand that. But really, just to amplify what Marco said, it is very, very, very much a pretrial population. And the longer that pretrial population sticks around, and we got one guy here 9 years, another 7 or 8 people here more than 5 years. There's some crazy numbers in there. The longer they stick around, it's just not a place meant to be that long. And so they get frustrated. It's not, they get nuts after a while, and they act out, and staff suffer the consequences of that.
Sorry, and it's Patsy Yang over at CHS. I just wanted to add to Bobby your original question and Marcos's response, which is that apart from the fact that CHS has never stopped working on specific cases and compassionate release, including these last 2 deaths, we have also continued on a broad basis to reach out and offer ourselves over the summer, reached out to all in writing and extended the offer to all defense attorneys. Our availability to offer medical summary and information, clinical information that might help them gain for their clients alternatives to incarceration, early releases, or some other negotiated agreement. Unfortunately, despite our written communications and our oral and including presentations in person to the various key decision makers in the judicial process, we've had fewer than a dozen responses in terms of interest to date. We will not give up, but that is sort of the lay of the land, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you.
And if I may, just to add to what Patsy indicated, I have been approached by defendants many times and say, would you consider supervised release or help us to put more people in electronic monitoring? Folks who they are already in pretrial, and the judges could change those conditions. I have said I have nothing but invested in these programs because we believe they are effective. The numbers out there. We have plenty of positions in supervised release. We have plenty of positions with electronic monitoring, alternatives to incarceration, all kind of programming that we are offering. As Patsy said, is not what we are not seeing is necessarily that they are being used to the full level that we expect to use in order to make a difference right now in the jail population. That's why we are emphasizing so much what we think is the most effective way, which is address the case delays. Just get the person in court and come up with a resolution of justice.
Just looking to see if there are other board members who would like to ask questions or comment. Seeing and hearing none. Thank you, Executive Director Sola. Very much appreciate your report.
Thank you, and again, thank you to you and the entire board, and thank you for your tenure with the board. It has been really very, very good for the city of New York. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciate you. Let us now hear from Meg, an update on restrictive housing rules.
Thank
Meg,
you.
okay.
Yep. We've asked the department to provide an update on the implementation of the restrictive housing rule and the RMAS system that ends solitary confinement. Under the rule, the department is providing monthly updates on their progress to reduce the number of people held in punitive segregation, and those reports can be found on the board's website. I will now turn it over to the department to provide their update.
Good morning, this is on the board.
Sorry, TOC, whoever is speaking, it's very hard to hear you. Thank you.
All right, good morning. This is Stephen Pizer. I apologize, I think I might be just off screen, but I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update this morning on the implementation of the board's rulemaking. As we've sent a number of written reports and plans and other updates, I'll focus on updates from the last meeting in terms of our progress. Since the last meeting in September, the department sent the board 17 draft directives, including track changes of edits and revisions made to various policies. Additionally, 6 operations orders or other policies were sent to the board for review. We submitted to the SCOC our design plans for the infrastructure changes in the RMAS level 1 and level 2 units that we discussed last meeting in mid-September, and on October 1st, we sent the drawings related to the dedicated program space we're planning for individuals in RMAS level 2. We're awaiting approval. We are hoping to receive it soon, in which case we'll begin construction right away. In addition to the policies of which we sent the RMAS policy, the bedrock of our plan changes, our training and development unit has nearly finalized our training curriculum, which we'll be happy to share with the board. We've sent an updated planning which lists out the various portions of the training, the courses. We are still planning for a 2-week training for both uniform and non-uniform program and counseling staff. So it will be a multidisciplinary training and it will cover, a broad range of topics that will be relevant to RMAS, including in-unit scenario walkthroughs, conflict resolution, specific portions on young adult management, as well as restorative justice and due process concepts related to RMAS. In addition to those updates, we've been making progress on our tracking and workflows for our reporting. We submitted to the board all of the reporting templates that we are planning to utilize to comply with the various, I think it's over 20 reporting requirements related to the rule. In terms of our programming, we have a draft program plan. We've developed sample daily engagement schedules for individuals in RMAS and RRU. Those have been sent to the board. Programming division is in the process of onboarding and hiring. We're working through the city process to onboard additional counselors and program staff, including social workers. And we've identified a staffing plan for both RMAS level 1 and level 2, as well as RRU. And we've begun the process of identifying specific uniformed staff to fill those roles. Again, we sent a draft staffing plan to the board for their review as well. Since the last meeting, we have sent the board an implementation plan, a disciplinary system plan, staffing plans, training plans. Through this process, we've sent the 9 reporting templates I mentioned, the 23 draft directives and policies, the design plans that were submitted to the SCOC, as well as 3 monthly reports, the last of which was expanded to include more information and progress updates on our implementation to date. Additionally, throughout this work, as I mentioned during the last month update, we have refined further our 15-day review process for punitive segregation. You may recall, our original process resulted in only a 9.6% rate of people recommended for early release. That was from when this program started in the end of August through late September. Since then, from September 23rd through October 1st, we saw that rate increase to 58.3% of reviews recommending early release. This is prone to fluctuate. We're now at a total of 28% from when this program started at the end of August through October 12th. So we're committed to continuing that process and further refining it. We're very pleased to see an increase in the number of reviews recommending early release, and we'll continue to work with staff in hopes that those numbers will continue to increase. Related to the due process portion of the board's rule, we have a planned meeting with defense stakeholders this afternoon, in which we'll hope to answer questions. We're working with OJ, set up a legal contract organization to implement that rule, and we're making progress with the infrastructure, the policies, and other related aspects of complying with that portion of the rule. And that will summarize my update in addition to the update shared previously, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Board members? Questions? Comments?
Can we just add one thing in about the RMAS 2 bubbles?
Please.
Sure. So Stephen mentioned construction work and plans being submitted to SCOC. Part of that is adjusting the way RMAS 2 looks like currently, and that is getting rid of the quads in the majority of the RMAS 2 units and aligning that structure with ESH 2, which is going to provide more free movement of space for people in RMAS 2.
Put down a couple of.
Thank you. Again, I will ask if there are any questions or comments from board members concerning this update. All right, and we will put this on the agenda for the next November meeting, and look forward to hearing what additional progress has been made. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask our executive director to lead us in the discussion about CHS and DOC, coronavirus 2019 activities in the jails and continuing questions. Nay?
Thank you. Again, we've asked the department and CHS to provide an update on the COVID crisis. We continue to, as Dr. Safier mentioned earlier, we continue to believe that vaccination for all who are in the jails, people in custody and staff, is essential to mitigating the effects of this emergency. Reducing, as we've talked about, reducing the jail population is also critical to keeping people healthy, and we're concerned that the number of cases in the jails has been rising in recent weeks, and we're certainly cognizant of how jail conditions can accelerate the spread of the virus. Today, the board will provide an overview of the COVID cases in the jail population, and vaccination. As we've done for the last several meetings, a longer presentation complete with key data points and trends on housing area capacity and testing will be posted on the board's website after this meeting. In terms of confirmed cases in custody, as of October 15th, CHS reported a total of 633 people, or 11% of the jail population, had confirmed COVID-19. That's both active and recovered. 61 of these patients had an active infection. As of October 15th, there were 371 COVID cases among CHS staff and 2,371 COVID cases among DOC staff. Fewer staff cases were reported in September as compared to August. DOC reported 73 new staff cases in September, down 14% compared to August when there were 85 new cases. Meanwhile, CHS reported 18 new staff cases in September, down 31% compared to August when there were 26 new cases. In terms of the total jail population, as we've talked about, the first wave of the pandemic promoted coordinated efforts to rapidly reduce the jail population, and by April 29th, 2020, the jail population fell to a historic low of 3,832. This trend slowly reversed for much of the latter part of the pandemic, and the jail population reached a new high last month, peaking at 6,095 on September 14th, 2021. This is a 59% increase when compared to April 20th of 2020. We observed a sharp drop in the jail population shortly after Governor Hochul signed the Less is More Act on September 17th. And on October 15th, nearly 1 month after the bill's signature, there was 5,584 people in jail, marking an 8% decrease compared to September 14th. As Jennifer said earlier, the board is encouraged by this action, but cautions that the decline in the jail population has appeared to level off, and ongoing vigilance and decarceration are desperately needed. On October 15th, the people in jail include 5,584 on pretrial detention, 110 are serving a city sentence, 142 people are held on technical parole violations with no open case, 194 people in custody are in custody for other reasons. And within these categories, 791 people aged 50 and over, including 37 held solely on a technical parole violation. In terms of vaccination, on April 5th, 2021, CHS added vaccination metrics to its public data snapshot. In July, CHS made a change to its vaccination reporting. Prior to July 23rd, CHS reported the total number of patients ever in custody who received the first vaccination dose by CHS, and the total number of patients ever in custody who completed vaccination by CHS. On July 23rd, 2021, CHS began reporting the total number of patients ever in custody who received at least one vaccination dose by CHS, because patients in custody are increasingly receiving one dose of the 2-dose regimen from a source external to CHS. Between January 7th and October 14th of 2021, CHS has administered at least one vaccine dose to 3,946 people in custody. The number of new vaccination doses administered by CHS rose sharply in late August and have since declined. And finally, as of October 14th, 42% of people in jail had received one vaccine dose and 37% of people in jail had completed the vaccination. I will now turn it over to DOC and CHS to provide their updates on their response. DOC, CHS.
We will let CHS open, and we'll be happy to answer any questions related to department operations.
Hi, it's Patsy Yang from Correctional Health Services. I'll just take an opportunity to also thank and acknowledge Jennifer and Meg for the work and the partnership, and wishing you both and each the best as you go forward. I also do want to just take a moment to note, most respectfully, that Correctional Health Services most strenuously continues to disagree with the board's finding regarding Mr. Feliciano and that incident. We do not believe that the Correctional Health Services ignored or missed information that contributed to the most unfortunate and tragic and awful outcome. And we do believe that the board missed an opportunity really to better understand sort of the nature of non-suicidal self-injury in the jails, which has less to do with clinical care than it does with the environment. And we do hope that Correctional Health Services' entire response to the board's recommendations will appear in the board's report so that the public can really understand the context of the recommendations and our part in this case. So thank you. That said, thank you again, Meg, for going over our data. I think since 2020, Correctional Health Services has continued to work really closely with the Department of Correction to try and manage this virus, this rapidly evolving, continuously evolving virus, in a congregate and carceral environment that poses challenges to any transmissible disease, much less one with such potentially serious outcomes. We did enjoy for a period of time from late summer until this summer rates of positivity that were below that of the city, and that has no longer been the case. Our 7-day rate currently is 2.6, which we dropped below 3, but we still are above that of the city. I think everybody understands that is also potentially a function not only of the epidemiology and the disease burden, but also a function of rates of testing that we do relative to the rest of the city of New York. The new admission positivity is 0.34 compared to rates of positivity among people who are not newly admitted, i.e. bringing the virus in and testing on intake, and that is about 10 times that, 3.45. Our strategy in terms of opening EMTC, as Commissioner Schiraldi had noted earlier in his comment, that was something that Correctional Health Services has advocated for quite some time, recognizing that OBCC was a challenging facility in a number of ways, and that while centralized intake was critical in terms of managing the sort of trying to manage and contain the transmission of a disease, that EMTC offered, as we learned last spring, a much better environment, physical plant environment, in which to both take care of people who are newly entering the system and getting them through intake and new admission, while also being able to separately and without more serious diminution in access to care for people who had already been admitted into custody. And so appreciate and thank our partner, Department of Correction, in moving forward with that plan of ours, which I think has held up, has made significant improvements in both in processing and in taking care of our patients, but really managing the disease. So that's good. And we continue to work with the department in terms of trying to manage as well as we can, smartly as we can, patient movement and cohorted housing, which really remains a key from back in March of 2020, even January 2020, before anybody even had testing available. It's a basic and fundamental way to try and contain a transmissible virus. So apart from that, in EMTC, the newest kid on the block was vaccination in 2020. In January, I think the board remembers that Correctional Health Services was able to successfully argue and advocate on behalf of our patients with the state of New York, so that we were, in fact, and remain the first municipality, locality, period, in the state of New York to offer vaccination to anybody who's in detention. The rate of vaccination among people who are currently in custody is over 42%. Of course, that does not reflect the number of people whom we vaccinated and who since left and are released back into the community, which is a good thing, all in all, both for people who, while they are detained and when they go home. The vaccination rate among our staff is 97%, and we continue to work to get closer to perfection. Perfection is generally unattainable in a real world, but 97% is pretty good, and we did manage that with some good advanced planning. We have great staff and great managers, really smart people who are nimble and accountable and on stuff, so that services really didn't suffer as a result of this mandate, which I think everybody understands and recognizes was a challenge to mount and spread to an entire service of healthcare professionals with their own concerns. But again, our vaccination rate is 97%, and we continue to hold to that and try to increase that. I think that's all about COVID. Our rates, we are heading into fall. We are in fall. It's gorgeous out, autumn. And but that means that as it gets cooler, more people will stay indoors. There's all the holiday gatherings. There are still breakthrough cases. There's still Delta. We are acutely aware of that. And we remain as vigilant as we can, despite sort of the prolonged and protracted sort of fatigue-inducing effort that this pandemic demands, certainly on everybody, but particularly on people who need to continue to serve. I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we take questions or comments from the board, just want to turn to DOC to see if you have anything that you'd like to add at this point, or will add.
Jennifer, nothing to add, but we'll be happy to answer any questions as always.
Good deal. So I'm going to begin with CHS, just appreciating that it was CHS that led the effort very early on in seeking to get as many persons who are detained vaccinated as possible, and essentially giving the authority to do so. What is your thinking at this point about what more must be done, and what efforts are you taking? Patsy, is there more that we can do on our end and to be supportive? And what should we be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just going to continue to monitor all our data, keep tight and vigilant on the strategies that we know do work. We're staying on top of all the breaking news and the research in terms of vaccine efficacy, boosters, making sure that as many people, everybody understands the value of vaccine. Everybody who's eligible for a booster is offered that opportunity again and again. We continue to work with our partners in the department to make as available as possible the vaccine. We are testing Ms. Arias is here, our Chief Nursing Officer. You're going to hear from her a bit later in terms of the health triage. But really is the backbone of our service, and our ability to test people. And again, testing is but one moment in time, but that does give us indication and helps inform the department, and helps us to work with the department to guide them in terms of patient management and movement, and housing, which is key to, the whole flow and operation of the jails, for moving people, keeping people in quarantine as they need, pulling people out into medical isolation as required, and really closely monitoring people, and letting the department know as soon as possible when any of our patients or a group of our patients who are cohorted are safe, from a transmissible perspective to be separate, differently housed, in a way that allows better jail management. And if somebody comes up with something new, we'll be on it and try it, whether it's vaccination or testing or something else. I think
Have you
that's
been
about it.
looking at other jail systems to see what they've been doing? Anything to be learned from other jurisdictions?
Yes, and in fact, since last spring, have weekly calls, our clinical staff with clinical staff in other large city jail, urban jail systems, certainly, in terms of, real-time exchange of ideas, things that work, things that don't work, learning from one another. And then that's apart from just staying on top of all literature and research. But yes, there's a community of people who are on this.
Thank you. Thank you. Board members, anybody want to comment or ask a question? Dr. Cohen, do you have a question or a comment?
Can hear.
You're muted.
Yeah, I was wondering if DOC or CHS could talk about vaccination rates and COVID testing in DOC staff. And what is the city's policy regarding weekly or biweekly testing of all people who come into the facility, of all staff? And what is the understanding of Steve raised this point earlier, just following up on him, of the vaccination rate and the vaccination policy. I just want to add that the rate of COVID infection for DOC staff has increased in the last two reports that the board issued, rather than going down. That they've both gone up, and currently, as you described, Patsy, the prevalence of COVID in the jail is 8 times the prevalence rate of people who enter the jail. So where are they getting it? Thanks.
Yes, so thanks, Commissioner Cohen. Since the mayor's requirement on August 11th that everybody either be vaccinated or tested weekly, we have had an increase of people vaccinated from 37% to 50% staff. Still not where we hope it would be, but everybody is testing weekly. And we have continued to encourage staff to get tested. We have testing, get vaccinated, that is. We have vaccination and testing sites both on Rikers Island, where people can go get vaccinated for free anytime they want, or 6 days a week. I just got a booster shot last week myself. We put a slide out for staff to kind of continue to encourage them. We're gonna have a family day at the end of the month. We're gonna see if we can get tickets to raffle off so that you get raffle off for free. That is, if you get vaccinated, you get entered into a raffle to win sports tickets, start giving away mugs and t-shirts. We got Dr. Fauci to tape a specific message for our staff and a separate specific message for incarcerated people. And we got several other celebrities in the pipeline. I think Piper Kerman did one for incarcerated people that we're putting out on our tablets. We do offer in-home vaccinations for staff and their family members. And we will take absolutely any ideas you have or anybody else has about other ways to increase it. We're not taking anything off the table.
Look at the school system.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're not
why are we not making it what you have to do? You're
Right, so
never
we
going to
have-
get anywhere significant if you're just working the way you are. I don't believe you will.
Sure. I think, though, it's important to recognize we have two public health problems going on right now. One of them is COVID. But remember, we've lost a lot more people to not COVID. And I think that triples and unstaffed posts contribute to that. And so it was great to open EMTC. And it did a lot of really terrific stuff. And it elongated how long we'll have triples and unstaffed posts. If everybody was mandated and we lost a lot of staff, we'd have a lot more triples and unstaffed posts and a lot more inoculated staff. So you're a physician, right? So, I've been taking statins since I was 40, and every year my doctor checks my liver function. My doctor's trying to cure my cholesterol, not hurt my liver, but he recognizes that when you do one, you might do the other. So we have no ideas we have that are purely good. They all come with a side effect. And so I think we have to weigh the side effect of mandatory inoculations against the loss of staff and the attendant problems that brings with it. And those have been pretty severe. So we're not taking it off the table. I'm just telling you, we're not just frivolously ignoring it. I love CHS's vaccination rate. I love the school system's vaccination rate. I hate triples and unstaffed posts and the problems that go with them. And every day when we have these conversations, we weigh both sides of that.
Statins is not the right, it's not the same thing. It was about you and your physician. The issue is people coming in and giving it to others. And we were not going to get anywhere. I mean, I'm sorry to say this. I know how difficult it is and how much you're trying, but you won't get anywhere unless you do what they are doing in the school system.
I'll just add, I think it's a point, I think it's an appreciable point that you're making, Board Member Safer. And I'm also hearing there is this continuous challenge, this balance, just trying to get staff back into the facilities. And so I'm appreciating the point and appreciating the concern, and I just want that to be noted. It's a very difficult balance to strike, but I understand where you're coming from.
And it's good that you're saying what you're saying, and I certainly feel that way. But we don't have enough people coming to work. And the way I think about people that don't come to work is they shouldn't be being paid. And two, we have people coming to work and they haven't had a vaccine. And this is not about them and their cholesterol. This is about them giving it to people who are there. And we're kidding ourselves.
Right. As I said, I don't disagree with that.
I know, Jenna. I know. I do. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No. Very much appreciated. Are there other board members? If I may just add, I'll ask the question, are there ongoing conversations with COBA about this issue?
Yeah, I've encouraged them to message this. I haven't really got much there. There's so many issues between us and COBA right now that there's not a lot of enthusiasm for messaging. But I suspect they usually do testify at these hearings, and they sure we'll have, you'll be able to talk to them about that, but there hasn't been a lot of movement there, let's just say it that way.
Thank you. Are there other board members who choose to comment or ask questions at this point? Okay, we're going to have an update now on the sick call hotline. Executive Director Egan.
Thank you. In March of 2020, CHS launched a sick call triage process. This is a confidential phone line established to be accessible from the housing area phones for people in custody to call CHS nursing staff to make medical requests, including sick call requests and non-emergent services. The triage line is available from 5 a.m. As far as we know, the triage line is available from 5 a.m. to 12 p.m. And if the person does not call during that time, the call will go to voicemail. All voicemails are to be answered within 24 hours on weekdays and 48 hours on weekends. And we've asked CHS to provide an update on this triage line and the services provided. So I will, and I know CHS has a presentation, which Otto, you can post, and I'll turn it over to CHS.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nancy Arias. I'll take off this mask. Hold on. My apologies. Good morning. I'm Nancy Arias. I'm the Chief Nursing Officer for Correctional Health Services. Next slide, please. So as you will see, most important to note is it's no longer called the sick call triage line. We are calling this the health triage line because it encompasses it's multidisciplinary, encompassing all the disciplines within our service that nursing is coordinating services around. And it's one of the components of the advancing the intake and the telehealth process, nursing being a very important core product of that as well. And our team-based medical care, which we are currently rolling out in our facilities. Again, nursing being a very important component of that as well. Next slide, please. So as you will note here, our patients do call our nursing line, our health triage line, I apologize. The nurses triage our calls. And the big component here that center focus is advancement in coordination of services. So the sick call triage line advanced to the health triage line because of the advanced coordination of services with multidisciplinary approach where nursing is coordinating with dental, pharmacy, keep, mental health services in real time. We also are, with our partners in medical, working with patient-provided scheduled services when appropriate. Moving forward, nursing supports encounters. Our nurses are working collaboratively with our providers on site in the facilities, not only presenting patients on site, but also presenting patients via telehealth. And nursing works with our providers to rectify our appointments, meaning reviewing our orders, making sure our orders are addressed appropriately within our electronic health record. Next slide, please. So as stated, our line is open from 5 a.m. to noon. We are seeing, after hours and weekends, we also pick up our voicemails. The only date that we don't have a nurse on site would be on a Saturday. The services received are on average about 293 calls a day, 217 not including abandoned calls meaning calls that just automatically drop off and don't get into a line. Of calls not abandoned, 89% of are answered live and 11% of those are retrieved via voicemail. And as stated, voicemails are addressed within 24 hours on weekdays and within 48 hours on weekends. Saturday is the only day we don't have someone on service. Next slide. So as you will see here nicely, the trajectory has been significantly increasing in the number of calls that nurses have received. In 2021 through September 15, there were 75,668 total calls, 56,082 of which were answered live or retrieved via voicemail. Next slide. 50% of our triage calls, in person or via voicemail, led to a scheduled encounter for our patients. 0.3% emergency, 15% same day or 38 routine follow-up or how they were scheduled. 40% of the triage calls were addressed through the triage process, administratively, or referred for further triage. And that's the end of my presentation. If there are any questions, please.
Thank you. Board members? Here's Dr. Cohen has a comment or question.
Yes. How many of the calls on the health line that the nursing staff decided required inpatient follow-up did the person get to the clinic?
Approximately 82% of our patients had a completed scene rate.
So 18%. So. Okay.
Any other questions?
It does not appear that there are other questions or comments. Thank you. Very much appreciated. Thank you. Board Member Safer, you raised, when you first came on, some concerns about mental health, and I don't know if we've, I don't feel that we've addressed them, and so I want to give you an opportunity at this time to just restate the concerns that you began with, and then let's have a conversation about that.
I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about how we're looking at people, because mental health issues are up in everywhere in the country and actually in the world. And the difference in Rikers or a jail or a prison makes it a little more complicated, and I understand that. But I think until proven otherwise, there is a large number of people who are thinking about some of these, it's like you're having a bad moment, and then what you do is never, you can't retrieve it. Suicides are up. Yes, maybe it was only 10 and not 12, but I mean, if you go back a year and a half, the numbers are way up. And I think we need to be, people are working hard. I know that this is difficult, but what are we doing to make this more secure and prevent some of the really bad things that have happened?
This question is directed to both CHS and to DOC.
Without it, yes.
So, I mean, I'm going to hand it over in a moment.
Thanks, Patsy.
But clearly, Dr. Sahier, we share the concern about this. I think we've spoken with you before about what we're trying to roll out and what we're seeing in terms of the general environment. I think people are aware, but particularly in the carceral setting, with all the sequelae, some of which Marcos presented earlier, in terms of the population and what has happened to the criminal justice system, particularly in the last year and a half. We continue to work very, very hard on our own and clearly with the department, to continue to maintain access for our patients to us and us to them. In many ways ramped up our efforts, and tweak them to fit the system as the reality is on the ground. I think we started this entire conversation, this meeting has been about what is actually happening versus and what we're seeing. One of the things that Ms. Arias, in her presentation on the health triage line, that was CHS's attempt back in 2020, even before, actually years ago, we conceived of it, and this was even before COVID hit, and its issues on mental health, which was we wanted to establish a way, and certainly the board members, or particularly the longer standing board members, are aware that correctional health services has long wanted a way for our patients to be able to reach us directly with their concerns without needing to rely upon the intermediary intersection of the Department of Correction officer. So that the significance of Ms. Arias' presentation and update to you has been about this triage line, where any of our patients can call us for any reason from their housing areas and reach and speak with us directly, and we can reach back out and say that we really do need to see them. And the fact that so many of those calls are handled and disposed of appropriately, albeit 82 is not 100%, but 82 is okay in terms of presentation of production of people to us, is a help. That does not in all obviate the challenges of the current state of the jails, and I think maybe Dr. Subedi, who's our co-chief of mental health, is here, and maybe he wants to speak a little bit more about his perspective. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. I think just to step back, we have a suicide prevention plan that's been in place for years and was very successful and has been successful, and that really we've all seen together that the rate of self-injury and completed death from self-injury has increased over the recent past. And so I think the focus has been to try to understand, well, what's been going on recently that has made it more difficult or has made it so that the interventions we have maybe aren't working in the same way. And I think we've talked about the environment, what's going on in the environment, from the external drivers, self-harm and suicide. And so I think our focus has been not to change what has worked, but really be able to modify what we've been doing to have a lower threshold to place people on suicide watch. As Dr. Yang said, also working really closely with corrections to ensure that we have access to patients for preventative work. And certainly when individuals are referred to us with any concern of self-harm or suicidal ideation, ensuring that we prioritize those patients, that they're seen as soon as possible, and then receive the care that they need. We've also worked very closely with our partners in the H&H hospitals to ensure that individuals who are not able to be managed safely in our setting are referred to the hospital. So, I think whether it's decreasing our threshold for suicide watch, increasing access to care, working closely with the Department of Corrections, and also escalating individuals for a high level of care when needed. Those are kind of some of the basic principles that we've been centered on.
I think we've been, as a healthcare service, working to maintain our accessibility to our patients, extra interventions and attention to people and circumstances and conditions and occurrences that may put somebody at slightly higher risk. But that doesn't, that doesn't address, and I think I'm trying to do a segue here, to the environment. And I mentioned this earlier in terms of the opportunity to understand Mr. Feliciano's event, the event involving him, in terms of the environment, right? Not so much clinical care, but the environment where most tragically, there may be opportunities where an unintentional or impulsive act, I think, Steve, as you were, referring to at one point here, ends up with an unintended and awful outcome. And those are opportunities that are created or present themselves in an environment that's not a clinical care issue. That's an environmental issue.
And I think along with that, part of, one of our basic interventions is risk assessment. And the risk assessment we perform is based on, the individual at the time we're seeing them and their history. And what we've seen is that the jail environment has become increasingly unpredictable. That risk for that individual may change soon afterwards based on experiences they may have with other individuals in the jail, with corrections officers. And so I think the more stable the jail environment becomes, the easier it is for for us to predict, or at least I would say, I shouldn't say predict, but to have a relatively accurate risk assessment. Whereas right now, the risk assessment we're seeing is changing sometimes rapidly after we see someone. So I think that's also important context to put in place too.
A comment on a question. I mean, you're bringing up the challenge of assessing suicidality from a clinical perspective when you have limited contact with folks in Rikers. And I want to hear, I mean, anyone who has done this work knows that actually this work is best done by those who are closer to those in residence, like the frontline staff and correctional officers and others who should be consistently asking and looking for signs of potential suicidality. What is the DOC work? How's the DOC working with you guys to kind of build that capacity in the correctional guards? I mean, it dawns on me that actually, having worked in institutions, that there were signs in many of these cases that those who are closer to the work, correctional guards may have seen. Do they have the training to be able to do the right prompts? Do they know who to go to quickly if they're in doubt? How is Department of Corrections capacitating themselves to prevent suicides from happening? Vinny, that question is for you guys. I mean, anyone who has implemented a good suicide prevention program knows that it actually heavily relies on frontline staff. What are you guys doing?
Thank you for the question. We're having some just technical issues. I'm not sure if it's just us or everyone on our video, but I'll turn it over to Rick.
Hard to hear.
Okay. Good morning. So regarding suicide prevention in the department, I think it's important to frame suicide prevention that it's a concept, that it's not something that an agency or department achieves. It requires ongoing vigilance, attention, commitment, and continued work to maximize prevention of self-injury. To that end, suicide prevention and self-harm have remained a critical priority for the department. In the last approximately 2 years, the department has revised, created, reviewed, and updated some key policies in order to establish the needed foundation for sound suicide prevention initiative and platform. That included a new suicide prevention and intervention policy, which came out in February of 2021, that covers, among other things, potential risk factors specific to the environment of jails and prisons, specific interventions and the appropriate policies and procedures to follow regarding interventions, such as constant supervision, screening tools such as the SCOC Form 330, expectations to staff to include taking immediate action upon the threat or witnessing self-harm or the threat thereof. Education regarding not our staff, particularly DOC staff, not judging the behavior. We've specifically outlined and prohibited the use of quote unquote, manipulative gestures or any similar judgment in that regard. We've educated staff that they need to describe what they see and not form a judgment. The policy reinforces concepts related to self-injury and the threat thereof, that they must take all threats or behavior, no matter how superficial, seriously, and take appropriate action for immediate referral to mental health professionals. Along that line, we have also revised our constant supervision policy, which was also distributed in February of 2021. This policy redefines an expansion and reinforces the definition of constant supervision, which is one-to-one watch, and that the individual must be monitored in close proximity close proximity with uninstructed view of the individual who's on watch at all times. So now that we have this foundation for these new and revised policies, the other piece of this is for us making a concerted effort to effectively reinforce and communicate the policies, the focus within the policies to our staff. We've done that through meeting with our leadership at the facility level. We've met with wardens, deputy wardens, assistant deputy wardens, reviewed the expectations, reviewed changes of policy, reviewed particular circumstances and appropriate ways to manage those. We have communicated this through several teletypes in the last year. We issued a self-injurious behavior teletype in February of 2020, a self-inflicted behavioral teletype in June 2020, and a suicide prevention and intervention teletype on September 27, 2021. Again, all of these forms of communication is intended to reinforce the key components of our suicide prevention, educate staff. I think it's important to repeat expectations and requirements within the policy to staff. We have also now expanded our efforts to support that additional communication with strategies, one of which is the chief of the department's office is working on creating binders with relevant information regarding suicide prevention that will be putting strategic locations within each of the commands. We've directed facility leadership to specifically focus on reviewing suicide prevention principles, expectations during weekly meetings. We are looking to develop information and broadening our information campaign to infuse, again, these principles and expectations to line staff, to inform them and reinforce their responsibilities and obligations within our policy and our expectations regarding suicide prevention. We're considering looking at creating posters, slides, and memo book inserts to have for the officers and frontline staff in the facilities, so everything's readily accessible to them. We are also looking to and support the expansion of suicide prevention aids in our facilities. And lastly, per the Commissioner's direction and support, we are formalizing and putting together a suicide prevention task force, which would include a number of senior executive staff from the department. I believe Dr. Cohen is going to be a member of that and other key community stakeholders. So these are some of the initiatives that the department has been focusing on in the last a little bit over a year. I think that, like I said earlier, we have a sound foundation now to move the department forward. And we are going to continue to repeat and reinforce these expectations of staff. Chief, do you have something?
Yeah, just to add, Chief Stoops speaking. Good morning, everyone. With regards to the suicide prevention policy under my direction, each day at all roll calls until further notice, that part of that policy shall be read and re-emphasized to staff. Historically, what we would do is put our teletype in. It would be read at 21 consecutive roll calls because of the importance and wanting staff to understand the importance of suicide or self-harm prevention. Under my direction, this policy is to be read each day at all roll calls until further notice.
Thank you for your thorough answer to my question. I think it's also important to keep in mind that you're doing a lot of really good work around increasing the knowledge of the staff, but it's going to take a significant amount of effort to change their attitudes, beliefs, and behavior. And there's actually no worse sign in institutions that the attitude of the safe staff has toward attempted suicide. There's no bigger marker of a poor culture when people actually believe that others are being duplicitous or deceptive when they try to commit suicide. So please keep an eye on that attitude, because it's usually a really good sign of a culture that has to change. I mean, you guys are going through a significant number of changes all at once, and I think this is the moment where everyone should be checking on each other, including staff on staff and staff on inmates consistently.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Franco. Very much appreciated. Are there other board members who'd like to comment or ask any questions?
Jennifer, it looks like Dr.
Yes,
Cohen has a
yes,
question.
Chair. This is James
Please.
Carino.
Yes. Please begin.
Okay, can I talk?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. I want to ask Chief Stooks. I know I've been out for a few years now, actually going on 5 years. We had a suicide prevention aid that we've had for a long time, a program where detainees were trained to look for signs and along with the officer did tours and then many times was a great asset because they would find people, that would open up to them more than the officers, and they would catch a lot of potential suicides. So I was wondering if that program is still in effect, and if not, then we need to get it in effect. But I'm just curious.
Yes, thank you, James. That program is still in effect. However, of course, with staffing issues and competing with COVID, there has been some disruption of the program. But that program is definitely in effect, and we are, at this point, putting great emphasis on increasing that program to ensure that our intakes and especially our mental elevation units have suicide patrol aides on post, and we're looking to expand it department-wide, whereas there will be suicide aides in all housing areas.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief Stooks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Cohen?
We had specifically asked for Dr. McDonald to be present. The last meeting there were no clinicians present, and we had asked that he be present. We were told that City Hall said he could not be present. Could you explain why?
Are you directing that question to CHS?
Yes.
We do have, well, Dr. Cervetti's here. Ms. Arias is here. We have the staff to answer your questions if there's something that you need answered. I'm happy to try to do that.
I asked the question.
Okay, so there are no further questions. You don't have any specific clinical questions that you'd like asked?
Not at this time.
Good deal. Thank you, Dr. Cohen, and thank you, CHS, for responding. I do not see any board members with questions, hands raised, or anything else. So at this point in time,
Jennifer, can I just make one comment?
Please.
Yeah. I want to be clear that this is not just, the jail or prisons. People are killing themselves now, and this has been a terrible aspect of what we're going through. Physicians have killed themselves. People of all different kinds of background. So that and it is difficult because we're dealing with a different situation. We're used to it in many other, in ways that may not be working for this. I, I certainly think that the responses were more than important and moving in the direction we need to go. But I'm saying, I'm not, and I don't pretend to be an expert on this, but it is clear that this is happening in all kinds of circumstances and situations. People are taking their lives for how they felt for a day, as opposed to how they felt for months or years. It's a very different situation we're living in right now. And two, I would say that I thought all the responses and the discussion was terrific. But I too miss Ross, and not having him here to me makes no sense. I don't understand it. And I don't think we can just pass it. He's devoted his career to this, and he's so talented. And I know you all know that. And not having him here now, it's like a guy getting published for saying what's going on. And I feel really bad about it.
Thank you, Dr. Safer. I believe you expressed the sentiments of many on the board. We are at the point in our public hearing where we hear from the public. I have a list of speakers who've signed up to speak. I'm going to call every person's name that has registered to speak. We have 10 persons who've registered. When you hear your name, I ask that you raise your hand using the hand icon below the participants list on your WebEx screen. If you don't see the participants list, click on the silhouette of a person on the menu at the bottom of your screen. Once you open the participants list, you should see the hand icon in order to raise your hand. When you raise your hand, we'll unmute you and you will be able to turn on your video. You can then begin your public comment. I'll tell you when it has been 3 minutes because you have only 3 minutes, and we will move to the next speaker. We're going to do our very best to honor those 3 minutes for everyone, and we ask that you do the same. The board also welcomes written comments. You can email written comments to boc@boc.nyc.gov or mail them to 2 Lafayette Street, 12th floor, room 1221, New York, New York, 10007. You can find the email address at our website as well. The address, the mailing address at boc.nyc.gov, boc.nyc.gov. I'll now call on our first speaker, and that person is Danielle Gerard. Danielle Gerard.
Here. Okay, sorry, we're a little technical difficulty unmuting. Thank you, board, and thank you everybody who made remarks today. We have a couple of questions from Children's Rights, where I'm a senior staff attorney. One is, what kind of training are the officers getting in order to deal with the situation on the ground? What additional training, how often, and what's the plan to have them actually participate and do their jobs, and especially not leave people hanging before they go to their aid. And in addition, and many of the DOC staff, and thank you, Commissioner Schiraldi, for saying so, things are really bad. And it seems like it might behoove the Board of Correction, I'm assuming you haven't done this yet, maybe you have, to write a letter to the mayor and perhaps CC the judiciary, emphasizing that bail should not be provided now, that people should not be returned to Rikers on parole, on technical parole violations, that there should be a wholehearted effort on behalf of both the administration and the judiciary to keep people out of Rikers. The last time I looked at the statistics, 35% of the people there were in on nonviolent felonies and technical parole violations. And it just seems that that would be a tremendous way to reduce as quickly as possible the population. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Your questions will be presented to the board, to the department for them to answer at the next meeting, if not before, and concerning efforts to decarcerate, including release for technical parole violations. That is something that we have presented to the city. Thank you. The next person to testify is Rachel. Forgive me for not pronouncing your last name correctly if I don't. Schneiderman, forgive me. Hopefully you got that. Rachel Schneiderman.
Hi, good morning. My name is Rachel Schneiderman. I'm a corrections specialist at New York County Defender Services. Thank you to the board for this hearing today. So as a corrections specialist at New York County Defender Services, I'm responsible for communication with and advocacy for our incarcerated clients. And I just want to talk about some of the things on the agenda today. So firstly, in terms of decarceration, last month, we reached out to the board and asked for 2 pieces of information. First, numbers on how many guards are showing up to work every day. And second, specifically in which housing units in each facility where guards are showing up. These requests for information have pretty much been ignored, even though to our knowledge, this information is available to the department. Without this data, it's really difficult for us as advocates to understand how we should prioritize who will be released. We really need the daily staffing numbers to be available to the public and then prioritize decarceration based on which units are chronically understaffed. Next, to talk about intake, there's a bit of discussion about intake and the changes that have been made and the improvements. And we have 2 clients who have currently been in intake for about a month at this point. It's very common for food to run out. And just a couple weeks ago, some clients were pepper sprayed and then not allowed to shower for days. So there are still issues at intake. They have not been solved. And then to talk about suicide prevention a little bit, in order to prevent acts of suicide and self-harm, at a minimum, the department needs to ensure that people who are prescribed mental health medications can get those medications, and those who want counseling are able to receive it. Our clients who need medication every single day are lucky if they get it once a week. People who want counseling have not been able to get it. They cannot get to medical. As a corrections specialist, I'm basically almost always notified if a client has a suicide attempt, suicidal ideation, or self-harming. And I'm lucky if a single day goes by where I don't hear about an incident related to self-harm. So the efforts that the body has made have not made a dent. And then to touch on COVID-19, there are these COVID units in the jails right now that we have very little information about. It's unclear if people are actually being tested or if they're just exposed and then placed in quarantine. Recently, we tried to get information about which housing units were in quarantine, and we reached out to the board to try to help us to get this information. And we were told that we were not allowed to have this information, which is really difficult because we need to know when our clients are not going to be able to make it to court if they are in a quarantine unit. And unless we have that information, again, it is very difficult for us to understand how to advocate for our clients. And then finally, to touch on the minimum standards, there are no minimum standards within the facilities right now. Our clients can't get insulin. The commissioner was talking about programming and being excited to start working on programs. We can't get people to go to the doctor. We are not at a point where programming can happen. And since nothing has meaningfully changed, we're asking the board to ask for immediate outside intervention, which is exactly what we asked for last month. And thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask our executive director to reach out directly to you because you raised points about having provided to the board a request for certain information and not having gotten it. Want to be certain that you're speaking about the board and not the department, and would like to hear more specifically what it is you're talking about. So Executive Director Megan Egan will be in touch. Margaret Egan, excuse me, will be in touch with you.
I will follow up.
Thank you. The next person on the list to testify is Kelly Grace Price. Is Kelly Grace Price with us?
Me, you going out for lunch?
Maybe go down.
It appears that someone is not muted, but Board Member Perino, you can mute. Kelly Grace Price. Is Kelly Grace Price here and able to testify?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I'm on low battery, so I'm not going to turn my camera on if you don't mind.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Ms. Jones, Ms. Egan, I'm crestfallen to hear of your departure. If there's anything I can do to get you to change your mind, just to stay us over in this time, I'm going to be in your ear. I know I won't change your mind, but I hope my efforts show to you how much your work means to me, both of you. I did not hear anything today about the plan for moving women, girls, trans, intersex, and gender nonconforming, and however much those categories allied with each other, from Rosie's to Bedford. I'm pretty sure I was only out with Frank for a few minutes. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but where's that presentation? I am, of course, against this plan. There's so many reasons. It's a 14th Amendment violation. It's definitely a Title IX violation. And I want to talk specifically to you, Commissioner Schiraldi, with all due respect. Your visit to Bedford seemed lovely. Did Bambi come and hug you? Did you get a flower from Thumper? Did the seven dwarves feed you? Did Cinderella magically make everybody's bed? Because there was a complaint filed this year in July by Cravath, Swain, and Moore against the acting commissioner of the New York State Department of Correction, Annucci, the associate commissioner of PREA, Effman, Stephen Mayer, the chief of investigations of special investigations for DOCS, Christian Nunez, department chief of sex crimes division, John Shipley, Department Bureau of Labor Relations, Sabrina Kaplan, superintendent of Bedford, Michael Day. And I want to take my time today, and I hope you'll let me have a few minutes extra to read you some portions from that complaint. I want you to know what's going on at Bedford. I want you to know what hell you're planning on sending us to. Surveillance cameras were not installed in many locations at Bedford. Many enclosed and isolated areas inside of the prison or isolated areas on the grounds of the prison where sexual abuse is more likely to occur or has been reported to have occurred are completely outside of any video or audio surveillance. These areas include the outside areas around the package room and certain parts of the recreation yard. For areas which there were privacy concerns, like the medical units, clinic, and infirmary, defendants Annucci, Effman, Kaplan, Day, and Velez permitted officers to have virtually unfettered access to private, unmonitored medical regions within these areas and failed to set up camera surveillance. Defendants failed to prohibit officers from being alone with women prisoners in areas where sexual abuse of female inmates is easily accomplished. When instances of staff sexual misconduct were substantiated, they were often found to have occurred in these areas largely unmonitored. It is widely known that Bedford, among inmates and staff, that certain areas in the recreation yard outside the package area and in medical units were not monitored, that frequent sexual activity between staff and inmates occurred there. Defendants and Sergeant took no action to locate these blind spots or to encourage staff to report them. It is widely known that the defendants' staff frequently do not wear or turn on their body cameras, even when male staff are alone with female inmates and out of view of fixed cameras. Defendants failed to ensure that policies requiring wearing active body cameras were followed consistently. To the extent DOCS nominally requires staff to wear or turn on body cameras or use those cameras for supervision or investigation, was at all relevant times grossly inadequate to protect female inmates. Defendant Sergeant B took advantage of the lack of cameras, both fixed and otherwise, within Bedford to assault Miss Doe, the same Miss Doe that was assaulted on Rikers and sent to Bedford. The same Miss Doe and the same Miss Smith assaulted on Rikers and sent to Bedford. Defendant Sergeant took advantage of the lack of cameras to assault her. Defendant Officer C took advantage of the lack of cameras outside the packages room to force Miss Smith, the same Miss Smith who was assaulted on Rikers and forced to perform oral sex, was forced to perform oral sex on another correction officer in Bedford on April 9th, 2019. These are not distant events. Defendant Officers C and B took advantage of the lack of cameras to escort people to the medical unit and to rape Miss Smith on July 5th, 2019 without a single camera in sight without getting caught. Do I have a minute more? Have I made my point? I
Ms.
could go on.
Price, I very much appreciate, I did allow an additional about 80 seconds, about a minute and a little less than a minute and a half, because I did think it important to hear the points that you're making. If you would submit the additional testimony, I do want you also to know that we noted that there are people in the community who've raised their concerns based on what you provided to me and others about the transferring of women to Bedford Hills. And so I thank you for that. There was a report or an update provided by the commissioner at the beginning of the meeting. And let's make sure that you get a copy of that as well. But we do appreciate your testimony and the points that you shared with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Austin. Godspeed to you.
Thank you, and the same to you. Thank you. The next person is Ashaki Antoine. Ashak, is Ms. Antoine with us? It seems that she is no longer.
I'm here. Can you,
Oh, okay. Thank you. Good. I'm glad that you're here. I apologize. Did
can
not
you
see
can you
you.
see me as well?
Yes, I can see you, and thank you. My apologies.
It's okay. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Asaki Antoine, and I'm the first citywide trustee of the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association. I am also a correction officer. COBA President Benny Basio and I have been sounding the alarm for months regarding the current climate in the jail facilities. Last month, City Council member Adrian Adams and Helen Rosenthal addressed the increase of sexual assaults and harassments against women who work on Rikers Island and the lack of tracking of these incidents by the Correction Department, which has now caused a hostile work environment. 55% of the Correction Department workforce are women, and we are not protected against these sexual acts while at the workplace. The Prison Rape Elimination Act protects inmates. Where is the policy that protects the correction officer? 2 months ago, Correction Officer A was choked and her breast and vaginas was fondled by an inmate. 2 weeks ago, Correction Officer B buttocks was groped while the inmate ran away and then was observed reenacting the crime to his fellow housemates. Last week, Officer C, who is a male, was just simply doing his job when the inmate touched his penis. 2 clinical clinicians were also sexually violated. The inmates are grabbing and fondling our breasts, buttocks, and other intimate body parts because there are no consequences. Rearrest procedures are lengthy and is in place. However, accountability for these actions need to be swift, as you, the BOC, agreed in your recent rulemaking. Do you know after these acts, the inmates return to the housing area to plot and prey on their next victim, the officer? Do you know that the inmates are dictating and demanding female officers assigned to the housing areas so they can execute their sexual desires? Sadly, their demands are being met. And if they are not met, in return, as a bargaining tool, the inmates are threatening to assault male officers. This is outrageous, repulsive, and outright disgusting. Sexual assaults and sexual harassments are traumatic and difficult to talk about. Shame, fear of retaliation, embarrassment, and the lack of support make it much harder for the correction officers to talk about or even report. The long-term psychological effects, if left untreated, can cause PTSD. Correctional officers need support as well. This is happening to us too. There should be a level of outrage and urgency to protect our women and now men who are subjected to these sexual assaults and harassments. And if you dig deep down inside your soul and you are not affected by this, you are no better than the average person who thinks a woman deserves to be sexually assaulted based on the way that she's dressed. Nationwide, we all can relate to the Me Too movement. Well, on Rikers Island, it's happening to us too. We need policy created and swift accountability implemented to protect our women and men who patrol the toughest precincts in New York City. This is happening to us too. Ms. Jennifer Jones Austin and Ms. Egan, I wish you the best of luck in your endeavors. For the rest of the board, I am calling upon you to protect the women and men that work in the Department of Corrections. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antoine. Very much appreciate, and I support what you're saying, and we all need to do a better job, because our role is not simply to just center on the needs of detained persons, but the staff that come to Rikers and the other jails every day. Very much appreciate all that you said. The next person is Alexandra Smith. Alexandra Smith. Is Alexandra Smith unmuted?
You may need to.
Oh, hi. Thank you.
Hello.
Sorry about that.
Please begin.
Thank you. I'm Alexandra Smith, an attorney with the Legal Aid Society's Prisoners' Rights Project. As conditions in the city jails become more perilous than ever, it is clear that this is an all hands on deck moment. The city charter vests in you, the board, the extraordinary responsibility of civilian oversight of the jails and the duty to safeguard New Yorkers who are held there. It is more true than ever that we need the board to do more. We need you to be the credible messenger of information to the public that you're expected to be, to judges, to DAs, and to every decision maker in the city. It is imperative that this board use its unique access to the jails to ensure that there are Board of Corrections staff in every jail on the ground reporting conditions to you. We need your staff to monitor jail video footage, and we need you to report on what is happening. We have seen very little public reporting from this board at this time when the city needs it the most. In the last week, our city lost 2 more people in DOC custody. Mr. Victor Mercado passed away after catching COVID in jail. And yesterday we lost Mr. Anthony Scott, a Legal Aid Society client who attempted suicide after bail was set. These deaths are tragic and were avoidable, as were all of the deaths this year. New Yorkers want to know how and why people are dying at the hands of the government. The board must be swifter and more transparent in providing this information. We understand that thorough death reviews take time, but we need preliminary information faster. We also urge the board to consider appointing an ombudsperson to help families navigate the process of losing a loved one while they're incarcerated. Too many families, too many times, get nothing but a phone call and then silence thereafter. They don't even know where their loved one's body is or who saw them die. They need guidance, and the board should consider filling that need. And finally, a word on the new restrictive housing system set to be implemented soon. We are very concerned about the lack of operational information or directives about the system. Serious questions remain about how the programming will occur, rounding and access to medical and mental health care, and whether and how the department will guarantee people's rights to have legal representation. It is imperative that the board closely monitor and frequently report on implementation of the RMAS system. For 5 years, the board engaged in rulemaking and talked about this new system as a sea change and a new way of looking at safety. The written rules are just the start. What matters now is how they are implemented. In a time of such great dysfunction and a lack of basic human necessities for people in custody across the department, the protections to which the new rule entitles incarcerated people are in serious jeopardy. They require a diligent, watchful eye. RMAS is one of the board's signature endeavors, and it needs to have a level of monitoring that matches the stakes. We urge the board to move to take immediate action to provide New Yorkers with the information and the oversight that we need right now. And finally, we would like to thank you, Ms. Egan, and you, Ms. Jennifer Austin-Jones, for your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. Thank you. The next person scheduled to testify is Claudia Forrester. I'm not sure that is Claudia.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Please begin.
Hi, sorry, I'm having a few technical difficulties.
Hello, my name is Claudia Forrester, and I'm a jail services advocate with Brooklyn Defender Services. Today, I am here overwhelmed and heartbroken by what I have seen and heard behind the walls. For months, advocates, incarcerated people, and their families have pleaded with the board to do something about DOC's mismanagement of their staff and its deadly impact on incarcerated New Yorkers. And yet, each time we meet, we carry the heavy burden of yet more New Yorkers who have died on our watch. We need drastic action immediately. Today, I want to alert the board about the department's continued use of indefinite solitary confinement and their failure to provide due process. Here are some of the most recent stories shared by people in custody. Mr. S is currently in an ESH unit at GRVC, and despite being in for over 3 months, he has yet to have a review or receive any communication from DOC staff about his placement. Our office's meeting with him last week was the first time he was allowed to leave his cell in over 2 weeks. That's 2 weeks without recreation, 2 weeks without a shower, and 2 weeks of complete isolation. Conditions continue to worsen, leading people to acts of desperation, including setting fires in their cells for the tiniest bit of attention. The smoke in his unit gets so thick he has trouble breathing, but when he requests to see medical care, his requests continue to go unanswered. Mr. J was supposedly on deadlock status. We know deadlock is not an official DOC policy, but instead a decision imposed on people where they are locked in a cell for 23 to 24 hours a day without any written documentation. There's no due process. People have been locked in for days to weeks to months with no mechanism for advocating for themselves. Mr. J was held on deadlock status for at least 5 weeks while in a PC unit. Others in his unit reported witnessing him urinating on himself, screaming, and going without food. We understand that he decompensated to such an extent that he has since been transferred to the hospital. Mr. R is someone our office has been trying to meet with for over 3 months with no success. We understand him to have an SMI, and we've sent multiple mental health referrals to CHS out of concern for his well-being, all of which were acknowledged. Yet when we followed up with the facility, we were told he wasn't on their radar, and it was suggested that their hands were tied to help any further. We can't speak to what happened internally with CHS, but it does raise serious doubts on how our referrals are being followed through on. Our staff went to visit him last week, and an officer informed us that he is in, and I quote, self-imposed deadlock. Because we can't speak to him, because CHS hasn't met with him, and because we can never trust the words of DOC, it's incredibly difficult to advocate or to know the truth. We continue to be deeply concerned for the safety of Mr. R and will follow up with both CHS and BOC. These are just a few of the many people DOC is subjecting to the horrific conditions of solitary confinement without due process or a means of advocating. Yesterday, we learned of a 14th person, Mr. Anthony Scott, died after a suicide attempt. We know self-harm is on the rise, dangerous conditions exist, people are pushed to the extreme, desperate for attention, and this will only continue. The board has a responsibility to the people in custody and should absolutely file a notice of violation to the department. We can't just wait until things get better. The department shouldn't get a free pass for violating your standards just because their staff are choosing not to show up for work. People are suffering now, and we need to keep holding these agencies, including yourself, accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Forrester. The next person scheduled to testify is Chaplain Dr. Victoria Phillips. Ms. V. Ms. V, are you with us?
Yeah, I don't see me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and now I can see you.
Peace and blessings, everyone. It's so much going on. I just really quickly, yes, I'm Ms. V. Really quickly, and I'm not affiliated with anyone today. I'm speaking directly for myself for a lot of reasons. Really quickly, RNDC was mentioned. The chief was correct. Some doors are done, but the commissioner was very correct. A lot more have to be done. So I want to address that. And the units that Chief Rillo mentioned, I just want to say on the record, I also toured them last week, and nothing was done in them. So yes, new furniture is supposed to be arriving November 1st, but the tiles need to be done. The old furniture needs to be taken out. The windows, everything in the unit needs to be done and fixed before any individual can move in. So I'll just jump right into what I want to say. I'm appalled that it took the public enduring shameful praise and strokes of ego before acknowledging multiple loss of lives from this board today. So it came as no surprise to me as the commissioner spoke of human beings being there for 9 years, even 5 years. Chair, once again, you were in your phone, smiling and texting. So let me just congratulate you on your departure. No, you are. Watch the tape again. So I really want to point something out to you as chair. 14 people have died under your supervision this year alone in 2021. And I know that's not all your fault, but I want to point out the problem with leadership, being in politics, and not following through. Because our communities in New York City depend on this board right here as oversight for the Department of Corrections. And when someone dies the day before they're supposed to have their fair day in court, I ask all of you once again, how many times have you visited Rikers in the boat and any other thing ran underneath the OC this year alone? Now, last time I asked that, only one of you silently raised your hand. So I'm going to ask you again, because our lives in the community depend on your oversight, not your connections, not who you're cool with, who you used to work with, not who you have a relationship from a different government agency with, what your job in this role, showing up. The people still don't even have a phone number that works to call into this board. How many of you went to Rikers to talk to the people that need to reach you? And speaking on that, is it true? I hope it's not true. But is it true that the monitors for BOC, the ones I advocated for in City Council for y'all to get the budget to help stop the mess in Rikers 5-6 years ago? Is it true that you instructed them, not you board, not you chair, but is it true that this board instructed your monitors to stop actually dealing with DOC or the medical? Is it true that any grievances received to this board, this oversight body, that is being sent back to DOC's grievance unit and not being followed up by this board? Your New York City lies on the line and you're failing at your job. And Chair, I'm going to hold you accountable because you say you want to come back into the community and help our people, but you're failing our people in your leadership role. And every board member here that is allowing this to go on, you have failed the people of New York. There's so many more things.
Thank you very much.
But let me be clear. If I
Thank you very much.
with grievances, you're going to pay.
Is up.
You're going to pay.
Time is up,
Blood
and
is
I just your time is up. And over the course
and peace and blessings. Blood is on your hands.
course of my 6-year tenure, you have repeatedly and consistently challenged me on my efforts and what I'm doing, and I have chosen to respect you at every turn. But since on this particular day you want to come at me again as you do other board members, what I'll share with you is that when I'm looking at my phone, I am following the script. I'm looking at who is scheduled to testify. I'm looking at what is coming next, and I'm communicating with other members of the board and the staff to find out where we are and if there are changes. You've come at me time and time again. You make assumptions that are false and invalid. And so I'm providing you.
Can you answer all the other things about your New Yorkers?
I am providing you with that feedback. I didn't have to do it, but I'm a little tired of you coming at me. And
okay,
so
but I don't work for you. I work for
everyone
in New York City's life. I am
the next person to speak is Jennifer Parrish. The next person to testify is Jennifer Parrish. Jennifer, are you with us? I see Jennifer's name. Yes, she is here. Good morning.
This has been an incredibly frustrating meeting for me to see everyone at this meeting not seeming to recognize, maybe except for, Dr. Safier, that, the jails are on fire. People are dying all the time. This board, after almost 2 years, finally released a report about the attempted suicide by Nicholas Feliciano, which has horrific details about what happened to him. There was not a full presentation of that report. There was not a discussion of the report. It was just brushed aside. I think it's unacceptable that that's the way that you're handling this. And I think that the board has contributed to what's going on in the jails right now by not holding DOC accountable when it's been raised to you throughout the COVID pandemic, what people were going through inside the jails last year, early at the very beginning of the pandemic. So suicides are the most extreme form of what people are facing, but people are suffering every single day. You've heard some description of that, but I just want to read a letter from someone who's inside. This happened to him earlier this year, but it's happening to people right now. He writes, I'm currently falsely incarcerated at VCBC. I was moved here from C95 on June 6, 2021. The reason for my writing this letter is I was held in a holding cell and intake from May 31st until June 6th. During this time, I was deprived my psychiatric medication and barely given adequate food. On June 3rd, having been so mentally stressed from not having my medication and the ordeal itself, I cut myself and was subsequently sprayed. I was placed in a holding cell in the clinic until June 6th. I had to beg 3 hours just for toilet paper. I had no privacy and was denied to be taken to a private toilet. I was forced to defecate as walkers by were able to see me. Aside from being embarrassed, this treatment was borderline inhumane. While being in the clinic's intake, I was barely given adequate food for 3 days, and I have the information on the cameras to prove it. In addition, throughout this week in holding cells, I wasn't afforded a real shower. I was allowed to wash off after being sprayed, but not allowed a real shower for a week. I never smelled so foul in my life. This letter is not about a lawsuit, but more about drawing attention, hopefully, to the conditions in this place. I'm a person and I was treated like an animal, let alone I'm a detainee, haven't been convicted of anything, and happen to represent the population of people falsely incarcerated. I sincerely ask for your help, if not for me, but to prevent injustices like this for future people detained in DOC custody. His letter reflects some of the things that were included into what happened to Mr. Feliciano, and I really hope that you devote significant time to that report and to what the Correctional Health Services, which did not take accountability at all and disputed every recommendation you made in this report. I hope that's fully discussed at the next meeting.
Thank you. I am trying to, my system went down, and so if you give me, I'm just bringing it back up to get the next person. The next person to speak is Madeline Feliciano. Is Madeline Feliciano with us?
Give me 1 second. Was here earlier. No.
Am I correct that Madeline Feliciano is a family member?
I believe so.
Okay. I'm sorry that we did not get to her, but perhaps we will hear from Madeline Feliciano at another point in time. The next person scheduled to speak is Martha Greco. Has Martha Greco joined us? Let's see.
I'm here.
Good morning. Please begin.
Thank you. My name is Martha Greco, and I'm a public defender at the Bronx Defenders. I'd like to begin by talking about my client, John Brown. Mr. Brown was serving less than a year at Rikers. He applied for local conditional release and was denied. He applied for clemency and was denied. He was shipped upstate to serve the last 3 months of his sentence and immediately contracted COVID. He suffered so severely, he was admitted to the prison's sickest ward. Was all that worth it? If DOC simply told the courts, we can no longer handle more than a certain amount of people, the courts would be forced to change their failed policies of hiding away social problems behind the walls of Rikers. Thank you to Commissioner Sherman for pointedly asking DOC about its efforts to get people released rather than shipping them to Bedford Hills. It seems like one of the features of the Department of Corrections mismanagement is that they see every issue in a silo and failed to see the interconnection of all the problems in the jails. COVID, violence, discipline, suicide, court production are all interrelated issues. I'd like to briefly respond to Mr. Solaire's presentation because as a public defender, I know exactly why cases are not moving forward in the courts. For an example, I'm actively on trial in preliminary hearings with one client, and there have been constant delays due to the Department of Correction not producing him for counsel visits. I have attempted to visit him over 7 times in the last 3 months and was turned away after waiting 5, 6, 7 hours. They tell me they have no captains available to escort him to the visit booth. Sometimes they're brutally honest and tell me nobody feels like going to get him because he's in a unit that is just too rowdy. And they're on their 2nd or 3rd tour and they just don't have the will or the energy to go into that unit to get him for a counsel visit. And because of that, we have not completed the trial. So when officers don't come to work, people can't be produced to counsel visits. When people can't be produced to counsel visits, they can't come up with a plan for their cases. When people haven't seen discovery and developed a relationship with their lawyer and social worker, they can't come to a quick resolution of their case. And when cases aren't being resolved, the population of Rikers grows larger and people in custody feel hopeless and frustrated. So when we come here and complain about the fact that absolutely zero planning seems to have gone into the November 1st implementation of right to counsel and disciplinary hearings, we're complaining because it's related to all the other issues. Having a functioning disciplinary system that actually deters people from using violence is a necessary part of getting officers back to work. Without a fair and well-functioning disciplinary process, violence will continue. And yet our pleas to plan for the implementation of right to counsel have been ignored by everyone until about 2 weeks to go time. We know DOC is in crisis, and we, advocates at Bronx Defenders who are experts on our clients, can help. DOC should be joining the call, screaming to decarcerate, and should be leading the efforts to get advocates into Rikers for disciplinary hearings, counsel visits. As this work slowdown proves, DOC has so much to lose if we keep implementing the same failed policies of the past 2 decades. We need to do things radically differently. The same old is what got us here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It appears that there are no more persons who've scheduled, signed up to speak, and I just want to confirm that. So if you'll give me a minute. Madeline Feliciano is not here with us. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. She's no longer with us. I don't believe there are any more speakers who have signed up.
Okay, so our public comment period has ended. There are no other items on the agenda. The next public meeting is scheduled for November 9th at 9 a.m. and meeting details will be provided on the website and an email will be sent to interested parties as well. Thank all of the board members for participating. I thank DOC and CHS for coming to the table today, as well as those who've testified. And the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. And the staff, I thank the staff too. Thank you.
Thank you.